Top of the morning, everyone. It is good to see you. Welcome to the fine, beautiful world that is DFS and sports betting talk on the internet. This is The Sweat, presented by DraftKings. I'm Emerson Lotzia. We'll check all the boxes this morning with basketball, hockey, and even some golf because if Tiger Woods wins the Masters in April, Jeff Ulrich says he will get in a cage with a live rabid beaver. But first, let's price check around the NFL. Since Week 13 is here, and so are DraftKings contributors Julian Edlow and Pierce Dietrich. Jules, which quarterback are you feeling on Sunday's main slate?
Well, I want to talk more about this beaver. How big is it? Can we set some odds on it?
Yep, these are all great questions. You will have to wait until the last block of the show. It's called a tease.
Wow. Well, that'll keep me watching. As for the quarterback position on Sunday, I'm looking to pay up here. Tom Brady in Atlanta against the Falcons is a spot at 7,200 that I'm pretty intrigued by. He already played them once this season in Tampa, had 30 DraftKings points in that game. The matchup sets up pretty comfortably. We're coming off a game where against the Colts, all those points came on the ground. Tom Brady only had 12 DraftKings points on Sunday in a tough road victory for the Bucs in a matchup that set up pretty decently. So Brady hasn't scored 30 DraftKings points since before that bye. He's had 23 or less in 3 straight games since the bye. I think this spot sets up pretty well for a bounce back in the division on the road indoors against a bad team.
What about you, Pierce? You going to pay up?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. I mean, I'm not going to the bottom like we typically do. I'll take it the mid-range with Kirk Cousins. I know Kirk Cousins is an up or down guy. Last week I warned that it seemed like last week was going to be a typical down week, and sure enough, it was for the most part. Well, this should be a bounce-back spot. He's in a better spot than Tampa. Tampa's Tom Brady facing Detroit. He's also going to play indoors. Detroit just has a terrible pass defense. I mean, you look at all the metrics, depth of target, air yards, yards after catch, just yards period. Every single metric lines up for Kirk Cousins to have a big game. Oh, by the way, Dalvin Cook is hurt. So they're more than likely going to pass more, rely more on Kirk Cousins and his elite wide receiving corps.
Yeah, and speaking of running back, which guy's price point draws and pulls you in, Pierce?
Well, the short answer is you're probably going to want to pay up. Now, if you pay for Tom Brady, it's going to be tough to get these top-tier running backs, but they're sitting there right at the top. They've all performed well. They're all in good spots. So you can't really go wrong with Joe Mixon. You can't go wrong with Jonathan Taylor. And I would even put Austin Eckler in that category based on his ability to receive passes against the Cincinnati team that struggles against receiving running backs. But where I'm going to go, I'm going to try to save some money so that I can at least afford one of those running backs, is look at Ty Johnson. I know he didn't really do that much last week because he just didn't get the volume, but in his 6 rushes, he had 42 yards. He's also in a good matchup against Philadelphia. They ranked 21st against the run. They've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs, 7th most to receiving running backs, which is what his role is supposed to be. He hasn't really seen that yet, and we haven't seen Zach Wilson check down to the running backs very much. It should happen at some point. Also, Philadelphia, 27th in adjusted rushing yards, allowing 4.7 yards per carry. If they just give him the volume, and I don't know why they're messing around with Tevin Coleman, but they are, but he doesn't need that much of a bump in usage to really get over and to work in lineups this week.
Jules, another spot you're going to pay up at running back?
I think running back is a position you want to get one of those guys at the top. Like the spot that you can argue Jonathan Taylor's in as good a spot as you'll see for a running back all season. So if there's ever a time to spend that $9,200, and he's almost $1,000 more than any running back on the slate, yeah, you can convince me to do that. And if that means finding other, rostering Brady and finding other places to pay down, then sure. Or if you're making me choose between paying up, I think Taylor's the safer spot to pay up, and I'll do what Pierce does and find another quarterback to pay down for and go off Brady. Hopefully find a quarterback that actually lines up under his center and not the guard on 4th down, but nonetheless a spot to pay down. But if I'm paying down a little bit, or at least mid-range at running back, to pair with a guy like Taylor, I like Eli Mitchell on San Francisco. Hopefully the lead job is still all his. We'll see how injuries shake out, but last time out, 27 carries for $133, 30 DraftKings points against Minnesota. And the week before, only with the bye in between, the week before, only 9 DraftKings points against the Rams, but the 27 carries tell you what you need to know. So going against a Seattle defense on a short week that we just saw, doesn't have it anymore. The way Seattle can be attacked through the air easily, but they're pretty bad against the ground game too, among the worst in the league. So if you're telling me that Eli Mitchell is going to be anywhere in the ballpark of the 27 carries that he's gotten in the last 2 games for San Francisco, he's a guy I'm very interested in at $6,000.
Jules, not enough people talk about how John Elway was first to do this like 38 years ago when he was a rookie for the Broncos against the Chargers. Everyone's thinking that, the dude in Minnesota, that Kirk Cousins is the first. Oh, no. 4 decades ago, the standard was set. Julian, what do you want to do at wide receiver? You going to pay up? You going to save? You got some value?
I think we almost have to go value here with the way that things have been going in this segment so far. But I will say, let's say you don't go with Jonathan Taylor. I think Michael Pittman is kind of a pivot play if Indy does get some points through the air, is an interesting way to go about things. Houston ranks 21st in DraftKings points allowed to the wide receiver position. So it's another route that you can go there. And then Darnell Mooney, he's $5,600. How many weeks in a row can he keep putting up, straight up wide receiver 1 numbers, and we say that we can't roster him because he's on the Bears or we don't know who the quarterback's going to be that week or whatever. Look at his game log. It's 3 straight of over 20 DraftKings points. He has 120 receiving yards plus in each of those last 2 games on 5 receptions, 16 targets in one of those games against Baltimore. Darnell Mooney, until he, has a drop off, he's been a guy that we can kind of trust, and he's still underpriced. It's a game against Arizona that, you're a home dog of a touchdown or more. So a decent game script atmosphere if things kind of go as planned.
Hey, Piers, Jules is going the value route. I mean, Darnell Mooney here is only $5,600. What do you want to do at wide receiver?
Now I'm going to venture into no man's land with Deontay Johnson at $6,800. If you're paying up for running back or you're paying up for quarterback, it's really going to limit your options at wide receiver. And I imagine most people are going to pay up at running back or quarterback, and they're going to have to save some money at wide receiver. So Deontay Johnson is going to go completely unowned, and rightfully so. There's a little bit of stink surrounding the Steelers at the moment. So you're going to get an explosive receiver who can be elite. That's really not that bad of a matchup with low ownership. And I see a couple scenarios playing out where the Steelers just get boat raced again and they're playing from behind and he gets a ton of targets. Like last week, he got 14 targets in a game that they were never in contention. That could absolutely happen this week against the Ravens. Or somehow, maybe we see the second half Steelers against the Chargers where Big Ben's able to hit the plays that he needs to hit and the offense is effective. And again, you're going to see Deontay Johnson look good against the Ravens team. And the Ravens, we've talked about this all season. Last year, they were middle to bad against pass defenses, or as a pass defense, and they're struggling again this year. Depth of target, yards after catch, missed tackles. They allow a ton of big plays, 51 20-plus yard passes. I think they have the most 40-plus yard passes this season. This is a pass defense that you can attack, and I would imagine that the way the game script goes, they're going. I mean, the Steelers can't run the ball, period, so they're going to have to pass. Johnson should get plenty of volume, and you're going to get low ownership.
Yeah, and now we go to tight end here, guys. It's one of those top-heavy positions, it feels like, every season, at least recently, the past few years. Darren Waller is week to week, is what his interim coach says, so that would leave just one guy $6,000. Will cost you at least $6,000. That's Mr. Mandrew. So, Pierce, what do you do at tight end? Whose price stands out to you?
You got to punt this position this week. I can't. I mean, if you pay up a tight end, you're making some serious sacrifices at running back, quarterback, or wide receiver that I don't think you can get away with. So, James O'Shaughnessy, your own Jacksonville Jaguars at 26. Shag Hennessy. I jumped into the game last week when Dan Arnold went down. 5 targets, 3 catches. If you go back before Dan Arnold showed up on the scene, he had 8 targets in that last game, caught 6 of them for 48 yards. He's been around the team for a while. He can get it done. And if you look at the game script here, everyone except for you, maybe, Emerson, expects the Jaguars to be playing from behind. Actually, You probably think of
Yeah, I do. Yes, I have accepted reality.
So they're going to play from behind. They're going to pass. He'll get the volume to reach value. And I'm completely fine. If he gets into the end zone, great. If he gets 3 catches for 30 yards, I'll take it and hope that I nail the rest of my picks.
Dude, $2,600. I love that, Pierce. Julian, do you agree you can't pay up here because then you'd be sacrificing other more important positions?
No, you definitely can't pay up here, especially with some of the high price plays we like at other positions, particularly running back. So I think that the injury to Darren Waller is the most important part of this position. So, I mean, he's got a D next to his name in the DraftKings app. That doubtful. We got a lot of week before we get here and actually find out his status. But if he is closer to doubtful in this game, I think that you just go with his backup in Foster Moreau. He's a guy that has played pretty well this season for a Raiders team that isn't strong at wide receiver to begin with, and they've had a lot of moving parts there. You know, you see the one game against the Eagles with 18 DraftKings points, 6 for 60 and a touchdown, caught all of his targets in that game. So he has the potential when the volume is there. He might be a little touchdown dependent, but if Waller's not out there and the Raiders play the way that they've played at wide receiver this season, he's a guy at $2,700 that should be relatively involved. It's a home game against Washington, decent spot. So, you know, you're almost, not that you wish injury, it's not like it's anything serious for Waller. You almost wish that he rests the game to get right here so that you can get some better value, much needed value at the tight end position.
Yeah, and even Waller playing a bit last week, he still saw 5 targets when he decided to fill in there. Jules, before you guys take off here, Christian McCaffrey is out for the season. There's some mixed reports about Dalvin Cook, who could miss a few weeks with a shoulder injury, although his head coach is not even ruling him out for this Sunday. So Alexander Madison and Chuba Hubbard will almost certainly garner the top 2 claims for our season-long fantasy friends watching right now. Which one would be your priority?
Yeah, it's a good question because we know CMC's done for the season. So Chuba Hubbard is the guy for the rest of the way. So it's, do you want a guy that you know is going to be the starter every week for Carolina and their putrid offense that can't move the ball down the field? Or do you want to find a guy on a good team that knows how to run the ball that you can plug in for Dalvin Cook for a couple of weeks? I know Dalvin Cook isn't out, but he's got the one torn labrum and now the other shoulder is done as well. It doesn't sound great. I will go with quality over quantity here and say that I want Alexander Madison, because if we do get 2 games out of him in terms of season long, he's a guy you can plug right in and play and get RB1 numbers from and kind of help you make that playoff push. Whereas with the Panthers, CMC is very talented, but you plug a backup in for him and it's just not the same, especially when that offense isn't moving the ball. So I'll go with Minnesota's offense over Carolina's offense essentially here.
Yeah, Jules, and Madison recorded more than 100 yards in both of those starts without Cook earlier this season. Pierce, what about you? Any chance you want to go over to the Panthers side, despite that offense just looking atrocious right now?
Yeah, no, we've talked about the Panthers' offense being terrible all season. We knew ahead of time that they had offensive line issues. They have offensive line issues every season, and it's a miracle that CMC can make stuff happen in that backfield. It's going to be a lot harder on Hubbard. It's going to be a lot harder on Cam Newton. And that's the reason why you don't want to take Hubbard in a vacuum, but it's not in a vacuum. We know that at the end of the season, there's a good chance that Dalvin Cook's going to be back. So if you're already going to make the playoffs and you're locked into the playoffs, then I would go with Hubbard, thinking that, well, maybe you'll be able to use him at the end of the season. You're not going to be able to use Cook, or you're not going to be able to use Madison because Cook will probably be back. Now, if you are trying to make the playoffs and you're on the fringe, then you definitely go with Madison. He's the better running back. He's in a better offense that can move the ball. He doesn't have to worry about Cam Newton poaching touchdowns from him. So short run, it's Madison. If you're already in the playoffs, you're going for the long run. I would go with Hubbard. You may not use him, but it would be nice to have him there on your bench at least.
All right, football dudes, thank you very much. Who to build your NBA lineups around after this quick break. Welcome back to the Sweat, everybody. Turning our attention now to the association where, according to Gary and Thorne's latest DK Nation article, tonight's 5-game NBA slate will hit you in not one but 2 waves. And that's because this evening's action is divided across 2 distinct time zones. Gare Bear is here, so is fellow DraftKings contributor Nick Fryer and RotoWire's Nick Whalen. We get some big Nick energy this morning. It's time for building blocks. So who are you building your DFS lineups around at the following positions? Gare Bear, start us out at guard, please.
Well, I'm glad you got through the first 2 sentences, Bedard.
Yes.
I'll fill you in on the rest of it now. Look, there's a lot of star players. There's a lot of big salaries on this slate, but I think I'm really going to be attacking the mid-tier tonight because of the presence of one game, and that is Raptors-Grizzlies, where not a single ounce of defense will be played, and the best guard in that game with John Morant on the sideline is Fred VanVleet. We talked about VanVleet against the Grizzlies last week on this show. He is more expensive in this game. He's now up to $8,700, but this is someone who's averaging 38.4 minutes per game in his last 4 games, and nothing about that is abnormal. This is someone who leads the NBA in minutes played per game. He is a volume player. He's also got a 62% true shooting percentage in that 4-game span. Gary Trent Jr. might not play in this game, and that would only give more usage to VanVleet. So going up against a Memphis team that has surrendered the second most DraftKings points per game to opposing point guards, it's really hard to ignore VanVleet on this slate.
Okay, Whalen, do you agree with that? Are you going to go with someone else?
That's exactly who I have on my little cheat sheet here. Fred VanVleet, 8,700 against this Memphis defense. Grizzlies are still the worst overall defense in the NBA. Like Gary had said, they're terrible against opposing point guards. The one thing is, like, without Ja Morant, maybe that defense is a little better for as great as Ja is. You can get pushed around defensively, and when you have someone like maybe DeAnthony Melton playing more minutes out there, that probably does help the defense overall, but still, that's DeAnthony Melton playing 7 more minutes is not all of a sudden turn the Grizzlies into a great defense. And on top of that, Memphis also has the worst 3-point defense in the league. They're allowing opponents to shoot just under 40% from 3. Obviously, Fred VanVleet does a ton of his work from beyond the arc. Over his last 3 games, he's averaging 25 points per game and 4 made threes over that span to go with 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.7 steals, even 1 block per game. From Fred VanVleet, who's like, 6 foot, 6'1". So I really think he's in a great spot tonight. $8,700, Fred VanVleet against that Memphis defense.
Okay, Mr. Fryer, you're up.
Well, I think Fred VanVleet's a great pick. The guys are spot on with that, but I am going to go with somebody a little bit different. I will go back to that Raptors-Memphis game a little bit later, but I'm going to go all the way to the top with Steph Curry at 11.4K tonight against Phoenix. And I know, you might look and say, oh, that's a little bit chalky, but you got 6 players over 10K tonight on a small slate. Quite a few quality options. I mean, James Harden going up against the Knicks, Kevin Durant, of course, in that game too, and the Lakers. And then Damian Lillard is right there at 9.7. But the biggest thing for me with Curry, of course, you're getting the consistency with him, whereas James Harden has fluctuated a bit here and there. I know Curry had that down game a few games back, but obviously it's going to happen once in a while. The biggest thing, though, is that the Suns are one of the 10 worst teams versus point guards from a fantasy perspective, and they've surrendered the 5th most points per game to point guards this season. So that's where point guards are getting their fantasy production against the Suns. And Steph Curry, I mean, what does he do best? Score. So I think that he's got to be a guy that you at least get some exposure to tonight.
All right, Whalen, what about it forward, man? Who would you build your lineup around?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to pay up at forward, I obviously don't mind Kevin Durant, who's just over 11,000 going up against the Knicks. You can never really go wrong rostering Kevin Durant. I don't even think we need to dig too far into that one. Anthony Davis been a little bit up and down. I think a lot of people have been down on Davis. That stat came out last week that he's like the worst jump shooter in the league. And that's kind of overshadowed the fact that he's still been a really good fantasy player this year, and his defensive stats are up compared to last season. I think he's in a pretty good spot tonight at 10-6 against the Kings team. Likely going to be without Rashawn Holmes again, likely going to be without Harrison Barnes. That's 2 starters in that front court. That means Anthony Davis probably going to be guarded by Alex Len for a decent part of this game. I think that's a matchup that you don't mind attacking if you're Anthony Davis. Gary had mentioned that Toronto-Memphis game really piques his interest, and I think Pascal Siakam at 8,500, pretty fair price. But Scotty Barnes at 7,000, 41 fantasy points against Boston in their last game, 30-plus DraftKings fantasy points in 4 straight. With OG Anunoby sidelined indefinitely, I think we're going to keep seeing a lot of nights where Scotty Barnes minutes are in that 35 to 40 range. We know Nick Nurse does not mind playing his starters big minutes.
So, Fryer, what do you want to do here? Again, 5-game slate, so not a whole lot to choose from.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a guy who's actually going to line up at point guard tonight, but you'll see him on DraftKings listed as a shooting guard or small forward because that is his natural position. Talking about Alex Burks, who's taken over at point guard for Kemba Walker, who has not only just been taken out of the starting lineup, he is now out of the rotation for the Knicks in the short term at least. Of course, with Burks' usage rate 18.6%. Kemba was at 21.1, yet Burks is the one that had has had two 40 DK fantasy point performances his last 5 games, and we got to expect that his usage rate is going to go up a little bit. And there are quite a few guys that have been ahead of him, but now he's playing the point, going to make a huge difference. And then, of course, when we're assessing this, you see on DraftKings, you'll see how the Nets have done against Burks' position, but he is playing out of his position tonight. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to go fairly decently because the Nets are one of the 10 worst teams versus point guards from a fantasy perspective, and they've given up the 3rd most points per games to point guards this year.
Gary, and what are the chances you're going with someone possibly against your Raptors there?
I will be going with someone against my Raptors. There's 2 really good options here. I'm going to lean with Dylan Brooks, who is in what I would basically call like the holy trinity spot tonight. 1, no Ja Morant so far this season. Only 159 possessions that Brooks has played without Morant, but he's averaging 1.32 DraftKings points per minute, has a usage rate around 36% with Morant off the court. This is a guy who might not pass to like a wide open Michael Jordan in the corner. Dylan Brooks loves himself. He thinks he's the greatest player on the planet, and it's amazing. Also, I talked about the environment for this game. You've got arguably the 2 worst defensive teams in basketball in this contest. This game went way over the number the last time these 2 teams met up. Now, no Morant in this one, possibly no Gary Trent. That could obviously affect the offensive output in this game, but Memphis has hit the over in each of their past 7 games. The Raptors have hit the over in 7 of their last 9 games. There's just no defense in this contest. And then you've got the hometown narrative. Not really that Dylan Brooks even needs more of a reason to shoot, but he's a Mississauga kid. He is playing in Toronto tonight. I could honestly see him taking 10 field goal attempts in the first quarter. And I'm not really exaggerating for effect here. I think that is something that could definitely happen. So if this game stays on script, unlike Memphis's last game, Brooks in 33 minutes, usage rate over 30%, I just think he's going to be easily able to outproduce this $7,000 price tag.
All right, dudes, we will go to the big beefy 5 spot there at center. So, Fryer, who do you got? Let's pick up the pace a little bit too, gentlemen. We're running tight on time, according to my producer.
Jeez, okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go back to that New York game that we have tonight. I'm going to go with Lamarcus Aldridge again, similar price range to Alec Burks at 5.7K versus Burks 5.6. The Knicks have given up the 5th most DK fantasy points to centers this season. Talking about another guy that's jettisoned somebody out of the rotation, Blake Griffin, who is now out of the rotation. He's asking DeAndre Jordan for advice on how to handle this. So we all know he's definitely getting sound advice and definitely in the right frame of mind moving forward. But in all seriousness, if we've seen when Lamarcus Aldridge's minutes hover around 30, like we've seen in the last couple games, he's flirting with 40 DK fantasy points. So a team that's not done well against centers in terms of fantasy perspective, and Aldridge has done well, may get more opportunities. How are you going to take that at this salary?
All right, Gare Bear.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Yusuf Nurkic, who's been a frustrating DFS play so far this season. You don't know if he's going to play 20 minutes or maybe get close to that 30-minute range. And that obviously is a big factor as to whether or not he's going to hit value tonight. But at $6,400 against a Pistons team that has the worst total rebounding rate in the NBA, I think he's going to be able to dominate the paint, dominate the glass. This is someone across his last 6 games averaging 1.44 DraftKings points per minute. So it's not a matter of efficiency.
Yes.
In English. It is a matter of volume. And I'm going to cross my fingers and hope he gets there tonight.
Dude, amazing work. Waylon.
Thank you.
I'm going in the same direction here. 6,400 is a really good price for a guy who doesn't need big minutes to return, 4 or 5 times value. Oftentimes he sits in that 22 to 25 minute range, and he's still capable of putting 40, 50 plus DraftKings points on the right night. He had 40 fantasy points in 27 minutes against Utah in their last game. Had a 59 DraftKings points game against Sacramento before the holiday. And like Arian said, this is more about the matchup than anything else. Beyond Isaiah Stewart, the Pistons really don't have anyone to throw at a big burly body like Yusuf Nurkic.
Gentlemen, slate approved pick time. Favorite bet on the DK Sportsbook. What is yours, Nick Fryer?
So I have two that I really like a lot. Steph Curry and his points plus assists. It's at 35.5 going up against the Suns. Again, spoke about him earlier. But Alec Burks is the biggest one for me at 23.5 points, rebounds, and assists going up against the Knicks tonight. Last game, he was one free throw away from hitting the over on this, just on his points alone. He's hit the over in this 5 of his last 10 games. He's now at the point guard role. I feel like that's going to make a big difference for his assist number where he usually lacks. So this is a big one tonight.
Gary and Thorne.
Safe play, Jaren Jackson over 6.5 rebounds at even money. The Raptors have the lowest rebounding rate in basketball across the last 10 games. They don't have Khem Birch tonight. If you want to get a little spicy with that one, Jaren Jackson to record a double-double is plus 550. I would sprinkle on that as well.
Nick Whalen, bring us home.
I like the Knicks to cover 6.5 at Brooklyn. That number was at 7 earlier this morning, already moving in the Knicks' favor. And like Nick F said, I like that Alec Burks prop, 23.5 points, rebounds, assists. I think that's an artificially low number. And, I think once we get a couple games of him at point guard under his belt, that's going to rise.
Godspeed, gentlemen. We still have some golf odds to discuss, including Tiger's chances of winning a green jacket 5 months from now. But first, we will put this show on ice after we take a quick timeout. All right, everybody, it's time to do that hockey. Good morning to RotoWire's Paul Bruno and AJ Scholes, plus Pete Jensen of the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast. Need your DFS picks for tonight's 8-game NHL slate. Start us off at center, Paul.
I'm fading the top pivot on the DK board tonight, Emerson. That's Patrice Bergeron, priced at $8,400 because he's going to be without his running mate, Brad Marchand, who's been suspended for the next 3 games. I think the visiting Wings will also provide stiff opposition for the Bees. I think a lot of the top price centers, in fact, have tough matchups tonight. So for me, I'm going to go to the go-to center in Tampa, and that's Steven Stamkos, who's back to leading his club in scoring with 24 points in 20 games this season. He's on a heater of late with 6 points in his last 4, in fact. He faces a struggling Jordan Binnington, who's nowhere close to the top of his game with 20 goals against in his last 6 starts. Take the Bolts captain tonight for $7,400.
Okay, Pete, how about you, dude?
I'm going with Trevor Zegras from the Anaheim Ducks. Rivalry matchup coming up against the Kings. Trevor Zegras really exploding here over the past 10 games or so. He's got 9 points over his past 7. Has had a good shot volume all season long, even when he was off to a slow start and couldn't put the puck in the net. But of course, Zegras, one of the highly touted rookies on the board this season. And I love what he's doing, especially since the return of Rickard Rakell. Rakell has points in 3 of his first 4 games since coming back from injury. So I'm going with the USA-born, tried and true Trevor Zegras, one of my favorite players in the league for sure.
AJ, your center tonight is who?
I'm going to go with, again, like Paul, kind of fading the top of the group and go with Mikael Granlund at just $5K tonight. He's got 10 points in his previous 8 games, including 2 with the man advantage. The Jackets, for their part, have given up 3.3 goals per game in their last 10, so it's a good matchup for Nashville, and you can ride the hot hand without paying up too much. One option that will be available, if you do want to use them, breaking news here, guys, Jack Hughes is going to play tonight for the Devils, $7,100. Again, he's a little bit higher on the price range. Obviously, he's been out for a while, but this is a guy who can just absolutely play, and maybe a few other DFS players out there will be scared off by the injury return.
So in the wings and things department, Pete, who is your guy?
Well, I'm definitely eager to see if Jesper Bratt is going to be playing with Jack Hughes, assuming Hughes is in the lineup, like was just mentioned. So Jesper Bratt actually has 17 points in his past 14 games, covering shots on goal as well. He's second on the team behind elite defenseman Dougie Hamilton, who's just pounding out the shots these days. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on the lineup construction with Hughes' return, but whether it's Bratt or his line mate on the opposite wing, Andreas Janssen. These are two guys that I think you need to work into your lineup, whether you can have one or both, or maybe even if one of them is playing with Jack Hughes at even strength, go with the stack, baby. Jack Hughes is the real deal, full-fledged breakout candidate, and any association for either of those two wings, Janssen or Bratt, is, I think, in your best interest tonight.
AJ, what are you doing at wing?
Well, first, I would definitely consider stacking Matt Duchene for only 5,800 with Mikael Granlund. But if you're not with me on the Predators tonight, I think you give Kirill Kaprizov a look. In November, he's racked up 17 points in 13 games, leading the Wild in points over that stretch. He gets a fantastic matchup with the Coyotes, who did earn a shutout last night, but they are going into the second game of a back-to-back. They've allowed 2.6 goals per game over their last 10. It's a steep price point at 7,400 rather, but I do think you have to seriously consider moving up for Kaprizov tonight.
Okay, Paul.
I haven't agreed with AJ in this spot for a long while, but I will here. I like the potential for that mismatch as Minnesota hosts the Coyotes. I know the visitors are coming off a 1-0 shutout last night. That's a 48-save effort by their goalie Karel Pamelka for his first win of the season. But that result's unlikely to repeat as a lightning strike in a second of back-to-backs, and Scott Wedgwood will get the nod in the nets tonight. So I like the fact that Kirill Kaprizov, 14 points his last 10 games, and the Wild have won 3 of their last 4. I think it's a great play. But I also like the matchup for Timo Meier of the Sharks, who faces a New Jersey club that has lost 5 of their last 7. Despite the return of one of their top 6 forwards, I still think that team is in a little bit of trouble. Meier has 11 points in his last 11 games, 10 games played as well. He's priced at $6,800 and will play in all the high leverage minutes as usual on the road tonight.
And then at defenseman, AJ, anyone stand out to you who may have an advantage?
Well, Washington's John Carlson has 5 multi-point games in his last 7 contests, yet he's only coming in at 6,500, which compared to 4 blue liners on the slate who will cost you over 7K. The matchup with Florida admittedly isn't great. They'll be facing Sergei Bobrovsky, but that should serve just to lower the drafted percentage for Carlson here. He's second in the league in power play points behind Roman Josi, who represents a $1,200 discount compared to the Preds defenseman.
Paul?
AJ's telepathically communicating with me. I'm on him with Carlson as well. The point scoring in the last 10 games, he got 13. Caps offense is banging out 3.5 goals per game. I don't know why he's priced so low. And the Panthers, for their part, they've given up 13 goals against in their last 4 games. I think it's prime time for Carlson to pad those stats. And I also like Miro Heiskanen picking up his offensive game of late, looking like the dynamic player that he was in his breakout year a couple of seasons ago. He has 8 points in his last 10 games played. My thinking is that he's not going to be available at this relatively low price point of $6,200 if he keeps this up. So I'll take him tonight. He faces a Carolina club that's tough, but they're on a 3 out of 4 loss streak. So all things point to Heiskanen continuing his recent run as well.
Okay, Pete, the blue line crew, who's your guy?
I have Heiskanen in my lineup as well, my mock lineup for tonight, because he leads the Stars in scoring. But go to the bargain bin here, tap into the power play of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Adam Beauquist has been starring on that unit lately. Of course, there's been a spot up for grabs for a few weeks now with Patrick Laine out of the mix because of injury. So Adam Beauquist, who of course came over from the Blackhawks in the offseason, getting a new opportunity here, and he's kind of been upbeat about it. It's one of those things, like Columbus wants guys that want to play for them, that are upbeat about playing for them in a big role, and Beauquist has a 3-game point streak totaling 5 points, including a 3-point game with a couple of power play points in between. So yeah, I really like what Beauquist brings to the table with that exposure to a top 10 power play unit. I mean, what a breath of fresh air, right? They had Tortorella for so long. You know, their power play was down in the dumps for years, but now they're top 10 in the league and they've stayed there through 2 months of the season. So I'm rolling with Beauquist for a really cheap price.
And then, Pete, what's your strategy tonight in the crease between the pipes?
I'm going to ride the hot hand if he's getting the start. Jake Ottinger has been really good for the Dallas Stars, 4-0-0. He's played 5 games. He's got like a 950 plus save percentage. And I think he was the guy, like, for season-long leagues that we had the most faith in out of the 4. Bishop's still injured. Khudobin hasn't been as good since that playoff run. And then Braden Holtby got off to a hot start, but then is now dealing with injury. And I think now he's taking a back seat to Ottinger because he was one of the bright spots of the team last year when they had all those injuries to Hintz and Radulov and all these other guys constantly. He was like one of the best players on the Stars last year, but he had a ton of overtime or shootout losses. Now it seems like that stint in the AHL to start the year really lit a fire under him. I think he's taken the number 1 job and not looking back. He's one of the best young goalies in the league. So I will roll Jake Ottinger, even with a difficult opponent at home against the Hurricanes.
AJ, who are you rolling with at goalie?
Well, Pete, I hate to do it to you, but it looks like it's going to be Holtby tonight, not Ottinger. It was Holtby that's manning the starter's crease, not confirmed yet, so obviously we can wait on that. For my part, another one we don't know for sure, but it looks like Mackenzie Blackwood probably going to start for New Jersey. Now, his numbers aren't great on the year, 4-1-2 with 1 shutout and a 2.72 goals against average, but the Sharks have struggled to produce all season long. New Jersey is minus 145 favorites on the DK Sportsbook, so I like the matchup here. I might be overthinking this by not just rolling with Kaapo Kähkönen, who's confirmed to go for Minnesota tonight against the wayward Yotes, but I just don't want to pay up that high there, and I want to look for a little more value and go with Blackwood further down the list.
All right, Paul.
For me, it begins with the best win probability for a team before I even look at who's the starter. And now that AJ's told me that Kähkönen's the guy, I don't even mind paying to the top of the board. I think DK gets it right. This is a Minnesota club that's flying right now against a Coyotes offense that's puny at best, and they're in the second of back-to-backs on the road. I do expect a win, easy win for the home side tonight. So I'll pay up for $8,500. But I'm also tempted to look at the Blues and the Bolts game. I can't remember when Vasilevsky was so far down the list, priced at only $7,700. That looks like a tempting option with the high win probability for the visiting goalie, who's not often that inexpensive in DFS play.
All right, Paul, this is, I feel like when you shine. Do you have any good value plays for us tonight?
You know I do, Emerson. Thanks for teeing it up. I like to find value options on the blue line, and tonight there's no exception. I'll be using the Sharks' Mario Ferraro, who's shown a lot of growth in his overall game. He's playing well over 20 minutes a night and has a modest 5 points in his last 10 games. But when you pair that with his leading shots on blocked rate, he's got 36 in his last 10 games. It's no wonder that he averages north of 10 points a game in DK action, and he's valued for me at $5,100 tonight. A little further down the list on the blue line chart, I like Dimitri Orloff of the Caps, who's a second credible offensively talented defenseman in the Washington mix. I spoke of that high-octane offense. It's like no other in the league for my money. He has 7 points in his last 10 games and figures to pad those numbers as long as this offense continues to hum along at their season-long pace.
AJ, what do you got?
Well, somebody has to play a power play quarterback for the Carolina Hurricanes tonight, and it's not going to be Brett Pesce or Tony DeAngelo with both of those guys on the COVID protocol list. So it's either going to be Jakob Slavin or Brady Skjei, and I think you have to kind of monitor that situation, but they're pretty cheap on DraftKings tonight. Slavin more expensive at $4,200, Brady Skjei at $32. So I would look at either one of those guys. I also like Owen Tippett at $2,800 for Florida. He's playing in a first-line role. He's getting an extended look with the number 1 power play unit there as well. And unlike Paul, I'm not as scared off of Boston just because Marchand's out of the lineup. They're used to him always being suspended anyway. And Taylor Hall comes in at just $4,200 while getting a bump up to the top line there.
All right, Pete, need some value from you, dude.
So I'll chime in about Ottinger if he's not playing. Keep an eye on Jonathan Quick, whether that team wins or loses. He keeps the games low scoring and has one of the best save percentages in the league. He's unconfirmed at the moment for the Kings against the Ducks, but I'm not afraid to roll out Jonathan Quick if he starts in net. And then for my value play, I'm going to stack the Capitals, even with a tough opponent in the Panthers. The Panthers have no Barkov, we expect. So I'm going to stack Alex Ovechkin, 9,600, with Alexei Protas, 3,200, who's playing as his new sidekick on the top line. Also seeing a little bit of power play time together. Protas has 3 points in his past 2 games, just scored his first NHL goal the other day. And playing with Ovi and Kuznetsov, Ovi's like the Hart Trophy favorite right now in my book. So, and he just keeps it going, man. He's now only 1 goal behind Leon Draisaitl for the league lead. So tap into him, offset his price with the value pick of the new kid on the block. 6'6", by the way, Alexei Protas.
Still not Zdeno Chara height. He's like 9 feet tall. Adios, dudes. We will wrap up the show with our gorgeous golf gurus, talking some Tiger Woods Masters odds, because he had some meaty things to say this morning and yesterday. Hang out. All right, guys, believe it or not, we do have a golf tournament to discuss. Only 20 players in the field, but some of the best in the world. And there's $1 million up for grabs for first place. DraftKings contributors, our gorgeous golf gurus, Jeff Ulrich and Reed Fowler, are here. Play a fun little game of PGA Tour, high or low. So are the following golfers' odds too high or too long, and too low, which is too short, for this week's Hero World Challenge in the Bahamas. Let's start with Rory McIlroy, plus 700. What do you think, Fowler?
I mean, he's the lowest on the board. So can't get much lower than this. And look, I mean, I think a lot of about Rory is going to go on seeing him with the ripped shirt after the DP World Championship in Dubai, right? And this guy's extremely competitive. I actually like him, and I think Jeff does as well. If you look at both of our articles, because he sets up well, right? As sixth there, he won previous to the DP World Championship. And even though this is his first time here at the tournament, we see guys like Jon Rahm win. I don't think that you need course history here to do well, although it's going to help. I don't think you need that. And Rory can hit it a mile off the tee. He needs to putt well, and you need to have a decent short game. And when Rory has won, when we've seen him win, those things are all firing. So I do like him. Of course, it's the shortest, so it could be longer. But, I mean, Colin Morikawa is there at plus 750, so I think it's perfect where it is.
Yeah, he's the favorite right now, Mr. Ulrich. Do you think these are fine, right where they are, plus 700 for Rory?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it is fine. I think a lot of people might look at it and go, why is he favored over Morikawa, who beat him last week? But, I mean, Rory is a classic links player. Reed mentioned the venue. I mean, this is not an overly difficult setup. And when you think of, players who can go low in these limited field events, I mean, Rory, he always comes up to the top of the list. He's kind of made a living off of, winning events like this, right? So he's been really motivated since the Ryder Cup, too. I mean, his game is in top form. When those scoring clubs get going for Rory, he's always consistent off the tee. So, I mean, he's just going to be a threat. I think it's a very good setup for him. I would prefer him over Morikawa, even though Morikawa is at bigger odds this week. Realistically, this is a small event. There's a lot of elite players. You don't have to bet the top of the board, but like it would shock me in no fashion to see Rory step up win Tiger's event here and just cap off a nice end to the year, because he seems very motivated right now. Maybe that'll come through more at the majors, but I think he's a deserving favorite. As Reed said, he can't get any lower, but I don't really think you can expect him to be much higher given how he's played in the falls. So
Yeah, after Rory, you got Colin Morikawa, who both of you have mentioned at plus 750, but then there's Justin Thomas at plus 900. So Fowler, are those too long or too short?
I mean, think about JT. Like his past performances are solid, right? A third, I believe, at where was it, Mayakoba, the last time he was out, or I forget if it was the RS or Mayakoba, but he's playing well, and we talk about it, and so I do think these could be lower. I wouldn't mind, honestly, Jeff, if he and Colin Morikawa were closer in odds. Even though Morikawa, we see that he's probably the hottest golfer right now on tour with what he's done. The first American to win the race at the Dubai Championship. So I wouldn't mind JT being this low, and especially like Jeff talked about with Rory. I mean, who's closer in this field? And this makes sense, right? This does matter. Who's closer in this field than JT to Tiger? Right? Like after all that's been happening with Tiger, seeing that press conference, seeing how much it shook the entire golf world, but especially JT, like that, I could definitely see him coming out and win this. So while I like Rory better, I think this is a little too high. I think this could be shorter. I think it could be closer to Morikawa.
Yeah, Jeff, it's kind of bizarre. A guy who claims like the Players' Championship, we're talking about it and people are calling it a disappointing year, but he's been pretty hot recently. So do you think these should actually be shorter?
I mean, it's pretty hard for me to sit here and say they should be longer, right? Because, I mean, there's good players in this field, but there's definitely a gap between the top three, in my opinion, and the next guys. So, yeah, I mean, if anything, like they probably should be shorter. Reed mentioned he was third the last time out at the OHL, or at the Mayakoba Classic, the old OHL Classic. But, I mean, Justin Thomas, like Rory, I mean, look at where he's gotten most of his non-major wins. It's like this CIMB Classic at these events where tropical venues, the Sony Open, where players go 20, 22 under. I mean, this is not going to be a tough setup for Justin Thomas. It's just, you look at Rory and Morikawa, clearly those guys have been a little bit sharper over the last little bit. They both picked up wins. So I think Justin Thomas is probably right there in the odds, but Reed's right. Like, this is a small event. So, I mean, even plus 900, we could say, well, you should probably be plus 800 or plus 850. I think, of the top three, there's a pretty good argument. You just say, well, just bet Justin Thomas. He's got the biggest odds. I couldn't really make an argument against that. It's just, I think clearly Rory's been a little bit sharper of late. So realistically, yeah, I would prefer Thomas and Rory over Morikawa this week, even though, I mean, these are, just like I said, these three are really close in terms of talent right now.
Jeff, would you bet Bryson? He just got smoked in the match. Would you bet him at plus 1,400? So this is going to be his first tournament appearance since the Tour Championship back in September.
So again, I mean, I think that if you're not betting, like if you're coming in here and you just want one guy and you want a little bit bigger odds, I actually really like this setup for Bryson too. I mean, all these guys are close with Tiger. Like Bryson's close with Tiger too, right? So it's not like he's coming here without, a little, like he's not going to just come here and shoot try and shoot 10 under and just have a good time. Like I think out of respect for Tiger, Bryson is coming in to probably try and win this tournament. Now, he hasn't been that good, and there's the low sentiment of the match. But look, his odds were at plus 1,200 earlier in the week. He's drifted. He's double the odds of the top players. We know Bryson is certainly capable of taking down an event with elite players in it. He's another player who, again, he's played well at Hilton Head. He's not going to have a trouble with like a lengthy, open-winded setup. I think this is fine for Bryson. And if you look at the advanced stats too, he still leads this field in long-term birdie or better percentage. If we're expecting a shootout here, I mean, why is the guy who's, leading the tour in those stats plus 1,400, double the odds of the favorite? I think Bryson is where I would attack in this range for sure. Seeing him up there, the same odds with Sam Burns, almost the same odds as Finau. Whenever you get Bryson with those guys, that's typically when you need to bet him.
Is that Finau slander that I hear?
It was Finau slander.
Sounds like
Reed's birthday of nonetheless. Sorry, Reed. I have to do it though.
Reed, there are 5 par 5s on this course as well. I mean, he could take advantage of that big time.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff's not entirely wrong with Bryson, right? Like anybody, there's 20 guys in the field. When you only have to beat 19 other players, Henrik Stenson can win like he did last time out. Right, that's what you can get. So attacking these guys deeper on the board is definitely the way to go. I still think this is a little too short for him, a little too low. Because of what we've seen from Bryson. It's just like, and in the 2 times that he's been out here, 12th and 15th, hasn't been great. And he started off really slow. And you need a fast start well, at least not a fast start, but you need a decent one. And we've seen Bryson kind of get off the slow starts in this, in this tournament. I'd rather go to my guy, Tony Finau, at plus 14, plus 1,600, wherever he is. He's finished 2nd and 10th here. In the past 2 times he's been here. And again, he's a guy too, right? You're getting a little bit deeper odds. And even if it's only 2 points, you're getting deeper odds on a guy who's probably right now, because Finau has played an actual tournament, in the last 3 weeks, and not some giggle fest that he did, that he got smoked by Brooks, who's twice his odds. I just rather bet someone like Finau, who might be in a little bit more form. Not saying that he's necessarily better than Bryson, but I just rather bet guys who have played a little bit better golf recently.
I got one more question for you guys here. Tiger Woods, we mentioned it at the top of this segment, discussing his golf future in his first in-depth interview with Golf Digest since his near-fatal car accident, earlier this year. He did have that press conference this morning, said he's lucky to be alive. He talked about his potential return, too, to golf, saying never full-time ever again, but instead, he'll pick and choose some events. Right now in the DK Sportsbook, you can bet Tiger to win the 2022 Masters 5 months from now at plus 3,500. I don't know if that's too soon or not. Reed, what do you think about the odds? What do you think about his comments? A lot to unpack here over the past 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jason Sobel, friend of the show, he put it perfectly. He said, why, we should never have doubted Tiger when he said, I'm going to make a comeback, and he won that Masters. And look, his odds when he won in 2019 were at plus 1,600 or around there, depending on where you got it. And that now you're seeing at twice the odds. I take a look at what Tiger said, and Tiger has so much self-belief, even if you don't believe, even if he doesn't say it, he's got so much self-belief that when you hear him say, look, I'm not going to be the same. I'm just trying to get to a point where I can be part of the game and pick and choose these tournaments. Of course, the Masters is going to be one of them, but this is not the same, type of golf that our grandpappies and our grandparents have watched.
Yeah.
These guys are really good. You can't do the Ben Hogan, who was 10 years younger or about there when he did his whole thing, right, with his car accident. So I'm just happy that he's fine, that he's come to grips with it. At plus 3,500, I wouldn't be touching that at all. The guy's barely getting, a 3/4 wedge in, and putting it on Twitter. You never doubt the man when he's saying he's going to come back. You can't doubt the man too either when he's saying that it's probably not going to be the same.
Yeah, I think he said this morning too, right? He can't really pinpoint on a calendar when he is going to be back. There is a long road ahead. 5 months does seem wicked too soon. Jeff, what about you, dude? Because he seemed at peace, which was nice. He seemed happy here. I just don't know if chasing odds like this for the Masters in April is a smart move.
Yeah, I mean, and do you want to back happy Tiger? I mean, you want determined, focused Tiger, right? I mean, it's too soon. It's please don't. Plus 3,500 should be plus 35,000. It's just too soon, man. I mean, I do think Tiger will have one more run in him, but let's give the guy a little bit of leeway here. Get him back into his body and have some practice time. Just get him in a couple. You want to see him at least play one event. Like you said, he doesn't even have a time. He doesn't even set a return date. So, realistically, he may not even start this event, or he could be coming in and just play ceremonial, and this could be his first event. That's probably not going to happen. So I think Tiger Woods has a path to doing something like Phil Mickelson did, but he's got to get back in shape first. Maybe 2023. We'll be talking about this in a more positive light.
Yeah, and again, this week's Hero World Challenge is an event that he hosts for his foundation, so I think that's why he's back in the news. He's talking a little bit this week, but I mean, hell, I'd rather watch Tiger Woods play putt-putt than never again. So it's good to at least hear that he is going to be targeting some dates, hopefully in the near future. Reed, Jeff, good talking to you as always. We can dive much more into this tomorrow on a Wednesday edition of the slate. We'll talk some NFL, we'll talk some golf. So that's it for the show today, everybody. Steelers, Cowboys kicking off our Madden slate at high noon. We'll talk to you then.